Meanwhile, after the new Republican-led House is sworn in next week, expect to see the first signs of the Tea Party's influence. First of all, the Constitution will be read out loud on the floor. Two, the author of every bill from now on will have to cite its constitutional authority. Is this real change or just something cosmetic to make the grassroots happy? Joining us now for a fair and balanced debate, Republican consultant Tony Sayegh and Democratic strategist Richard Socarides, a former special assistant to President Clinton. Gentlemen, great to have both of you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Jamie.
Happy New Year, Jamie.
Tony, let me ask you how important it is to those Tea Party-backed candidates to have the Constitution read. And is it right for Americans right now to get back to this core, I guess, institution, which the Constitution is?
Well, it's going to be a great exercise to also contrast the difference between the way this Congress is going to operate versus the previous Congress. You already are seeing with the health care law, for example, a lot of constitutional challenges to the way this law was not only constituted but passed. So basically, when the American people voted against the Obama agenda in November, they were also voting against business as usual, and this is a complete departure from business as usual. And it's also the Republican Party taking very seriously the message sent to them by the Tea Party, which is they're not going to stand for just cosmetic differences. This is a very serious difference, and I applaud Speaker Boehner and the leadership.
Richard, what about transparency, greater or less, with the reading of the Constitution and the requirement that these bills be read by all those involved in voting?
You know, I actually think these are two really good ideas. I mean, I'm kind of surprised that the Constitution isn't read already, and I understand it hasn't ever been done before. So I think if every day, at the beginning of the session, we remind ourselves what our country stands for, the basic things that we are all for as Americans, basic fairness to people, the rights and responsibilities to be shared equally, everybody to be treated the same. I think that's a really good thing. I think it's also a good thing that members have to cite what part of the Constitution forms the underpinnings, forms the basis of a piece of legislation they're proposing. I think that actually some of the right-wing legislation you'll see will be more foiled, more adversely affected by this. I mean, if some of these right-wingers have to say what these restrictions they're proposing on individual liberties, what part of the Constitution supports them, I think that the progressives, people in my party, in the Democratic Party, will actually fare pretty well and actually better under these rules.
Tony, does it slow the process or speed it along to have that constitutional authorization or justification for new legislation passed?
Well, listen, I have to give Richard credit. This is not a controversial issue. I mean, the Constitution is our governmental DNA. It's the genetic code of the way our system of government operates. So if it does, by that fact, slow things down, maybe it's for a good reason. And don't forget, this whole fast and furious running thousands and thousands of pages of bills through Congress in the dark of night was something the American people totally rejected in this past election. So if this does slow down the process, I think it will be for the betterment of better legislation.
Maybe we're seeing here on the first day of the new year the kind of bipartisan agreement. Maybe we hopefully can see some of next year. I mean, I think that the American people sent a message in this last election that they want to do things differently, and I think you even saw in this past lame duck session the parties much more willing, much better able to work with each other and deal with each other. So maybe this is a good sign, and hopefully any more transparency I think is a good thing. And I think anything done differently than the way we've been doing it is going to be helpful.
And that is, do you not believe, Tony, that the American public spoke loud and clear that they don't want Washington as usual? What would be an important next step, and will it come from the Tea Party-backed candidates or others, Republicans in particular, that could give America more of what it wants from its elected officials?
Well, you have to applaud the Republican leadership, not on just these two rules changes. They made about a dozen in this past week, where I think you're going to see greater transparency, spending controls. We're going to go from pay-go, where you could actually have new spending by raising taxes, to cut-go, where if you want new spending, you have to cut existing spending. You've had issues, I think, in this Congress where you've just seen the government rack up bills that they can't afford, and in this new set of rules, you're going to see that process totally change and slow down because that's what the people demanded.
I have a tiny bit of time. Let me ask you this, Richard. What about the debt ceiling and the ability of the government to ring up? They may cut spending, but we may see actually the amount that this country will owe grow in other areas. What do you think can be done about that, and who's going to make the push?
Well, you know, we have to make some very hard decisions about the deficit, and we have to start raising taxes. I mean, I know we just got a bill through, a bipartisan bill through, that included a big tax cut with, you know, tied to extension of unemployment benefits, but we're going to have to start raising taxes on the rich and on the super rich in this country. We can no longer afford these tax cuts for millionaires. And I think that this bipartisanship, this reading the Constitution, this making people say what part of the Constitution is directly aligned with their bills is all a good thing. But are we still going to insist upon tax cuts for millionaires? That's my question.
All right. Well, I have to leave
Your
it there,
president
gentlemen.
disagrees with you, Rich, at least for 2 years.
But you did agree on an awful lot, like bringing the Constitution back
We
into
did
play is
today
a
agree
very
on a
good
lot.
thing.
That's true.
So
That's
Tony
true.
Sayegh and Richard Socarides, great to talk to you on the first day of the new year. Take care, both of you.
Great to see you, Jamie. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.